So throughout the last year, as documented on my channel, I've been working on my first indie game called Muster. If you're interested in the specifics of the game, I highly recommend checking out some of my individual devlogs, but the gist is that you're going through various lands trying to recruit soldiers for your army, and each stage or world ends with a big factional type war. But this video is kind of a retrospective on the whole process over this past year, as this has been pretty much my first exposure to the world of game development. It's also almost been a full year since I published my 3 months of learning game development video, which, doing that math real quick, comes out to a little bit over a year. So here is what I've learned, and hopefully there's some good tips for new game developers and designers. This video is sponsored by Walling, but more on that in a bit. So one of the major things I noticed working on a project for a prolonged period of time is just how much I refactor and rebuild things. It seemed like half the work I was doing was rebuilding a system that I didn't really program well earlier on, as I had less experience with game dev and Unity. So if you're starting to get into game dev, definitely don't build super complex systems in the beginning, as you'll likely just have to redo them in the future as you get more familiar with whatever game engine you're using. Now, speaking briefly about game engines, I highly suggest you use one like Unity, Unreal, Gamemaker, or Godot if you're wanting to get into game dev. At least at the beginning. I think making your own engine could be really cool, but that's kind of a whole project itself. Also, a lot of these engines have a bunch of engineers consistently working to improve them and add new features. Trying to build your own game engine is essentially rebuilding the wheels from scratch when you're just trying to assemble a car. Also, using a popular engine like Unity has the added benefit of having a ton of resources and forums to help fix problems or ask questions. I personally have used Unity over this past year and really like it. But that's not saying much because I've only used Unity. The next realization I had over this 1 year of learning game dev is to focus on what you like. Now, there are so many aspects when creating a game, like art, design, implementation, testing, marketing, etc. Trying to focus on all aspects, especially at the beginning alone, is a recipe for giving up early. I personally like the programming side of the game development process, so that's generally what I focus on and try to improve. For the art side, I've purchased assets from super talented pixel artists that I've mentioned before, which allows me to make a lot more progress on the actual gameplay side of it, the part I really enjoy. But it all depends on what you're trying to learn and improve on. If you're wanting to get into game development, but from the game art side, focus on creating assets. If you want to work on your game design skills, just use some placeholder assets or purchase some from marketplaces like itch.io so that you can test out your ideas. This next tip I've heard from many other indie game creators is the importance of prototyping, which I didn't really do. Basically, before investing all your time into a specific idea, implement the base level features of the gameplay loop and test if it's even fun. This will save you tons of time working on an idea that turns out to not really be that fun to play or even build. Now, I mentioned that I didn't do this, but so far I don't think it's super negatively impacted me, as my game also acts sort of like a playground where I can test out ideas and learn new designs. Also, the nature of my game is kind of hard to quickly prototype because it has a lot of interconnected systems that make the game what it is, or what I hope it to be. For example, if you're making a story game, it can be kind of hard to prototype a story game because you kind of have to implement the whole story to really appreciate the full game. I've said this before, but I think it still holds. Only work on game dev, or really any side project, when you actually want to. Unless you have some deadline you absolutely need to meet, setting a rigid schedule of working on a side project that's supposed to be fun honestly takes away some of the fun of doing it. Actually allowing yourself the space and time to do non-game dev related things is important and even necessary to avoid burnout. There are some days where I literally just want to run Garen top in League of Legends and forget all my problems. Probably going 0-12, but you know, still. Or go for a run through the hills of Seattle, slowly destroying the cartilage in my knees. But hey, this ultimately allows me to stick with game development and not get bored or burnt out. And after not working on the game for a few days, I'll get an itch to implement some idea I just thought of. Maybe that's why they called that website itch.io. God, such a bad joke. This approach approach also helps with thinking of ideas. Some of the best ideas that I thought of for my game was when I wasn't actually working on the game at all. It was when I was watching TV or eating or taking a walk. Additionally, playing other video games can highlight systems or ways of implementing a certain feature that you like or don't like. For example, I really liked how Terraria implemented their inventory system, so I built out one with similar functionality. Obviously, don't copy exactly, but taking inspiration from various works is a normal part of the process. Overall, I think this is a much healthier and sustainable approach to any hobby, especially ones that take a lot of time like game dev. Another tip I've heard from more experienced indie game developers is to work on small projects first and release them. That way you have the familiarity and general experience of seeing a game from conception to release before working on a super big and in-depth game. Again, I didn't really do this, but I can definitely see how this would be beneficial, and I probably should have. I also want to say that it's okay to quit. Game development is not for everyone, and nor should it be. It's totally fine and even good to try it out and realize that, hey, it's not actually something you're passionate about. Now for some skills that definitely helped me with getting into game dev. Obviously first is programming. I studied mathematics and computer science in college. I worked at Microsoft and currently work at Google, so I was very familiar and comfortable programming in multiple languages. For those wondering, my favorite languages are definitely C# and Python. If you have never programmed before, game development might be slightly harder to get into depending on the level of complexity of the game you're trying to build. There are certain programming paradigms, algorithms, and data structures that software engineers or other people with programming experience know that are definitely beneficial in game development. But there are also less programming intensive game engines that might be a better fit. And there are tons of free tutorials that you can also follow along with. Art is obviously another big skill that would definitely be beneficial. I, for one, do not have really any artistic ability, but there are tons of opportunities and resources to improve your game art skills if that's something, again, that you want to focus on. Less of a skill and more of an activity, but actually playing video games I've noticed definitely helps with game design and development. It also just gave me a huge appreciation for really fun or complex games. Like I mentioned before, you might be playing a game in your free time and say, hey, this is a really great system or feature or quality of life idea, which can act as inspiration for your own features. If you're getting into game development, I'm gonna assume you play video games anyway though. In terms of how much it costs to really get into game dev, I'd say it's pretty affordable. Obviously, you'll need a laptop or desktop that's able to run whatever game engine you're using, but other than that, a lot of game dev software and resources are free. There are tools like Sprite or Photoshop that will definitely help on the art side, but there are also a ton of free alternatives. Also, there are tons of amazing tutorials, like I mentioned, on YouTube for almost any functionality in one of the big game engines. So you don't really need to invest in an expensive game dev bootcamp or course, though if you want to work in an actual studio, you might need more formal education. I'm not a recruiter or a hiring manager, so take my opinions with a grain of salt. And speaking of free tools that will help with your game dev journey, you might want to check out this video sponsor, Walling. Walling is a visual tool to organize all your ideas and projects. Like I mentioned before, there are so many aspects to game development, and it's easy to lose track of all the things you might have to work on. With Walling, your project can be organized on one wall, where you can organize your game brief, ideas, character information, quests, and even code blocks, which means you can manage the project all on the same wall, so everything related to your project is organized just all in one simple place. Walling is also built with collaboration in mind, where you can invite your team to your wall to collaborate with you in real time and communicate way more effectively. You can all add ideas, leave comments, and even assign tasks to different team members. It's also all visually appealing and really clean, which definitely adds to its effectiveness as a productivity tool. Visit walling.app. You can also find the link in the description below to create a free account and start organizing your ideas and projects. Thank you to Walling for supporting the channel. And one last major thing I want to mention is that although this might sound depressing, but I think it's beneficial to have generally no expectations for the success of your game if you release it. If it does great, then that's awesome. And if it doesn't do so great, hey, you still made and released a video game, which is still super impressive. So overall, I've really enjoyed this last year of learning game development. I'm trying to make regular devlogs documenting the progress, and although I don't have a planned release date right now, I can't wait to have a demo of Muster ready for you all to play and give feedback. Leave any suggestions for learning game development in the comments below, and consider following me over on Twitter, where I sometimes tweet some cool game updates, and join our Discord for a great community around game development, programming, career, and college advice. Hey, Thanks for sticking to the end. It really means a lot to all the people that watch all these devlogs. I know I'm not like the greatest or really even that good of an indie game developer, but we're trying to get better. Thank you to Walling again for supporting the channel, and check out their link in the description below. Again, you can sign up totally for free. My name is Michael. We do bad British accents at the end of every video. Check out one of my past videos and my past self would thank you dearly, and check out one of my future videos and my future self would also thank you dearly. We also got a new microphone to start off the new year, so hopefully it sounds good-ish. We make college advice, career advice, tech, computer science, game dev type content on this channel. If any of that sounds interesting, consider subscribing and like this video to help your boy out with that infamous YouTube algorithm. That's all from me, and hopefully I see you in another one. Bye-bye.